Greetings, Illumineers, and welcome to another look at rules you might get wrong, Whispers in the Well edition. Last time around, Fabled was mostly a reprint set, so there wasn't that many new rules or interactions to go over, but this time in Whispers, this brings us a whole slew of new things. So there's no time to waste, let's get right into it. Number 1, new keyword abilities. There's actually 2 new big keyword abilities this set. There's a lot to look at here, so let's start with Alert. And more specifically, we'll look at the comprehensive rules document in section 10.2 under keywords. Alert is described as a new keyword ability, notably the important parts outlined in 10.2.1 and 10.2.3, which state that the character with Alert does not gain evasive itself from having the alert ability. They just gain the ability to ignore the challenging restriction of evasive. This is most easily demonstrated as an example having a Dumbo Ninth Wonder of the Universe in play alongside a Lexington small in stature. If an opponent has an exerted genie, for example, Lexington would be able to challenge into that genie, since the alert allows Lexington to bypass that restriction requiring evasive in order to challenge genie. However, I would not be able to use Dumbo's Making History ability on my turn to exert Lexington and draw a card. That ability specifically states that a character has to have evasive. Now, I would be able to exert a Jafar on my turn for Dumbo's ability because those characters would gain evasive on my turn, even if just temporarily. But Lexington's alert only allows the challenge of evasive characters, not gaining evasive itself. Boost has a whole host of things attached to it, metaphorically and literally. As of now, this ability is exclusive to Whisper types of characters. Whispers are glimmers represented by a kind of ethereal torn page of lore, but mechanically, Whispers have the Boost mechanic, which is an effect where you can pay some amount of ink in order to put the top card of your deck under the card by activating that cost. There are some new and relevant terms and definitions we'll get to later, but for now, let's take a look at some examples of the different ways that Boost can work. First, let's take a look at Ariel Ethereal Voice. She has Boost 1 ink, which means once per turn you can pay 1 ink to put the top card of your deck face down under this character. And the ability Command Performance, which reads, once during your turn, whenever you play a song, if there is a card under this character, you may draw a card. This kind of Boost implementation is basically just a check to see if a condition was met in order to gain some additional effect. In this case, the check is triggered by playing a song. The ability checks if there is a card underneath Ariel. If yes, draw a card. If no, nothing else happens. This is the most simple and most common implementation of Boost so far. These are designated by the phrasing if there's a card under or something similar, like Merlin completing his research, which has the ability Legacy of Learning that triggers upon banish and then checks for a boosted card for the additional draw 2 cards effect. Next, let's see Simba King in the Making. He has Boost 3, which increases the cost of Boost up to 3 ink, but it still only places 1 card underneath. However, Simba has the ability Timely Alliance, which reads, whenever you put a card under this character, you may reveal the top card of your deck. If it's a character card, you may play that character for free and they enter play exerted, otherwise put it on the bottom of your deck. Now, first of all, if this sounds familiar, it's basically identical to the trigger of Mufasa from way back in Rise of the Floodborn, but rather than trigger on being banished, it's triggered on when you boost. Importantly, this is a repeated triggered effect. This is designated by the word whenever at the beginning, which means it can be repeatedly triggered on each instance of boosting. So putting 1 card underneath, boosting once, has the effect happen. Pay another 3 to boost again, and that effect happens again. The last would be gaining a static effect from a boost. Ursula Whispers of Vanessa shows this within her Slippery Spell ability. This acts kind of like a pseudo self-shift mechanically, where the card is physically upgraded with additional stats and static changes by boosting. Her ability reads, while there is a card under this character, she gets +1 lore and evasive. It's designated by the word while. It is a persistent effect once that condition is met and there is a card underneath. Number 2, Conditions Update. Within the comprehensive rules, in order to help clarify some of the complications of introducing multiple ways to stack cards on one another, there are additions and changes to some specific definitions. First is a clarification to the word under. Previously, that only applied to shift, but now with boost, there are additional interactions to be dealt with. Here, the text is added, a card that's under another card in the play zone isn't considered to be in play. Any player can look at a face-up card that's under another card at any time. No player can look at the front of a face-down card that's under another card anytime, not even their own. So the main thing to consider here is that cards under one another are not considered in play. Face-up cards are public knowledge, and face-down cards remain unknown to all players. In a stack, not to be confused with the stack in Magic the Gathering, a stack is just a definition of a pile of cards in which the top card is in play and has one or more cards beneath it. They are considered to be in a stack and treated as one object, especially if changing zones. After leaving the zone in which they began, they are no longer considered part of that stack. Face up and face down mostly clarify that having a card face down is a different condition, while providing clarity to what it means to be face up in public knowledge. Dry and drying remain effectively unchanged, but there is some clarity with regards to status in cards of different zones, notably that the cards in your deck and inkwell are considered to be face down, and the cards in your discard are considered to be face up. Cards in hand don't have any condition. But why does this matter? Well, let's consider an example. Let's say you have a Scar eerily prepared in play, and you have activated boost once, so there's one card underneath it. You pass the turn, and they play a Hades, choosing your Scar stack, which means Scar and the card underneath it are considered together in a stack. They will both go into your inkwell. Scar will transition from face up to face down condition. However, since the card under Scar and your inkwell are both face down zones, at no point do either players get to see what the undercard was. It remains face down as it moves from in play zone into the inkwell. All right, with all that bookkeeping out of the way, let's get to some interesting interactions or rulings that you may not be aware of. Starting with number 3, gonna start with a super quick one, the full 6-color champion cycle of Mickey, Minnie, Goofy, Donald, Daisy, and Pluto. Fittingly, our main Mouseketeer crew. Now, these cards are all cards which gain or give effects depending on the ink identity of your other characters. This seems simple, right? If you have a Daisy out, your Tipo gains resist 1. But what if you have a Penny in play alongside a Mickey and a Pluto? Well, as described in the announcement of Dual Ink cards belong to 2 inks and have the characteristics from both. So in this case, since Penny is both Amber and Steel, she gains both the +2 willpower from Mickey as well as the Banish for Lore effect from Pluto, while counting for both Mickey and Pluto's ability checks, so Friendly Chorus and Make Room. Number 4, next stop is Olympus with Next Stop Olympus, a seemingly innocuous 2-cost action that has the text, if you have a character with 5 strength or more in play, you may pay 2 less ink to play this action. Okay, well, if I have a 5 or more strength character, it's free, but it doesn't say free, it says pay 2 ink less. This gets my Thalia senses tingling that they don't want this card to be free if there are additional cost taxes, such as Gantu Experienced Enforcer or something similar. His ability, Don't Get Any Ideas, adds 2 to the cost of any action or item. So in the case of Next Stop Olympus with a Gantu in play, the 2 less and 2 more effectively cancel each other out, and you just pay the face value of 2 ink to play that card. However, there's also a second line of text which reads, Ready chosen character. They can't quest for the rest of this turn. The next time they challenge another character this turn, gain 1 lore. And I am sure everyone reading this card immediately thought of Maui Half Shark and wondered if that would work how they thought it would. And yes, it does. Now let's take a look at it piece by piece. I have a dry Maui Half Shark in play and a Next Stop Olympus in my hand. My opponent has, let's say, 4 Exerted Diablo Obedient Ravens in play. How much lore do I get? Let's find out. First, We quest with the Maui, okay, 1 lore, and Maui is exerted. I have a character that has 5 or more strength in play, so I can play Next Stop Olympus for free, choosing to ready my Maui for the first part of its effect. Maui's wayfinding ability sees that I've played an action and puts that ability marble into the bag. Next Stop fully resolves, and Maui gains the effect that the next time he challenges a character, I gain 1 lore. Maui's Wayfinder effect then resolves, gaining the +1 lore for the action that was played. Total of 2 so far. Next Stop goes into the discard pile. We use Maui to challenge a Diablo. The declaration for a challenge triggers both Maui's Chi-Hu ability and the delayed Next Stop Olympus ability trigger, which are both placed into the bag. Looking back at section 436 describing the steps of a challenge, it's outlined by 43612, where all of the effects triggered by challenging are added to the bag and resolved after the challenge has occurred in 43610 and before damage is dealt in 43613. The active player controls both of those marbles and can resolve them in any order, but either way, it's +1 lore from the delayed trigger, 3 total so far, and then Chi-Hu returns Next Stop Olympus from the discard to hand. You can probably see where this is going. Play Next Stop again for free, +1 lore for the action, ready the Maui, hit the next Diablo, +1 lore for the next stop, return the next stop, repeat this, gaining +2 lore for each time you go through the loop. Here, with 4 Diablos and the 1 initial quest, this situation would gain a total of 9 lore and banish all of the opposing characters. For funsies, if you happen to also be in steel, you can throw in One Last Hope beforehand to allow Maui to also challenge into ready characters and give him a little defensive buff with the resist. Number 5, Prince Charming. He is a 7-cost bodyguard with a massive 310 stat line and the innocent-looking ability Protective Presence, which simply reads, each turn only 1 character can challenge. Now, many players originally interpreted this as only 1 challenge may occur, but that's not actually what the card says. Some of the confusion came from those asking for clarification from Kyle at Ravensburger, who initially misspoke by referencing a different iteration of the card earlier in its development cycle. The card as printed actually pretty clearly states that only 1 character can challenge, but it says nothing about the number of times that character could challenge. So, for example, if you have that previously mentioned Maui Half Shark with Next Stop Olympus, or perhaps the more common Monstro with a grip of cards to discard, take comfort in the fact that the single character can challenge as many times as it normally would be able to. Number 6, Cinderella Dreams Come True with Ratigan Greedy Genius. Now, Ratigan is not a new card, but he is an 8th cost 6/7 that quests for a whopping 4, has ward, and the ability Time Runs Out, which reads, at the end of your turn, if you didn't put any cards into your inkwell this turn, banish this character. Now, Cinderella Dreams Come True is a new card, and she's a 4-cost 2/3 with the ability Whatever You Wish For, which reads, at the end of your turn, if you played a princess character this turn, you may put a card from your hand into your inkwell face down to draw a card. What you may notice is that both of these abilities say at the end of your turn. One puts ink into play, and the other cares about whether you played an ink for this turn. So what happens with both out and having not inked for turn? Let's say I already have the Ratigan on board, and I play a Cinderella that turn. I have some number of cards in my hand, and as described in 441, I go to the end of my turn by declaring the end of my turn. Per 4411 and 2, effects that would occur at the end of turn are added to the bag and then resolved. Because the trigger is at the end of turn, both are added simultaneously. And relying on our old friend 873 and 874, multiple triggers are added simultaneously, and then the active player chooses and resolves them in any order they would like. So in this case, I can choose to resolve Cinderella's ability first, allowing me to put a card from my hand into the inkwell in order to draw a card. Now, the ability itself is an A to B syntax as described in 7122, meaning that I would have to put a card into the inkwell satisfying the first part of the clause in order to draw a card. Anyway, Back to the main idea, since I have now put a card into the inkwell, I go to resolve Ratigan's trigger, which will now check whether or not I put any of my cards into the inkwell. His ability does not care how a card gets into the inkwell, just that one did or did not. It sees that the card was placed there by Cinderella into the inkwell and gets to hang out for another turn, hopefully questing for another 4. Number 7. Our next example is Goliath Clan Leader. He is a big 6-cost 6/5 that quests for 2 and has 2 abilities, but it's the second one I really want to talk about, Stone by Day. Now, this is an ability shared by several other characters, namely the gargoyles, which restricts the ability to ready them if you have 3 or more cards in hand. Now, one might think, well, I could just use Next Stop Olympus card from earlier, right? Or some other similar effect to ready that card manually, kind of force it to ready. Well, looking at our golden rules section, specifically section 122, it reads, if a rule or effect would prevent something from happening, that rule or effect supersedes other rules and effects that allow it to happen. Or more plainly, can't beats can. If 2 effects contradict each other, the one that says can't will win out. So the only way to be able to ready Goliath or the other gargoyles with this ability is to make sure you have less than 3 cards in hand. Number 8 begins Controversy Corner time. Now, these in one way or another caused a flurry of activity, and as of the time of writing this, we still don't have a definitive conclusion on most of these, though we do have a pretty good idea of how they work. If any of these get any noteworthy updates, I'll be sure to put that in a pinned comment down below. Now, the first one of these is the question of whether or not you can play Belle, Apprenticed Inventor out from underneath the Black Cauldron. Well, let's take a look at both of these 2 cards individually. Belle isn't new, but does have the ability What a Mess, which reads, during your turn, you may banish chosen item of yours to play this character for free. Notably, this is not an alternate cost. This is an activated ability. We'll come back to that in a moment. But the next one is a new card, the Black Cauldron. This 3-cost item has 2 abilities, one which puts a card from your discard under itself, and the other which lets you play characters out from under it. So, can you play Belle for free from under the cauldron? Or more specifically, if you put a Belle under the cauldron, could you then banish the cauldron on top of her in order to play her for free? As of right now, the answer appears to be no, but there has not been an official confirmation as of the week leading up to the Whispers release. The most definitive answer we have so far is Kyle from Ravensburger specifically citing back in February how the method for playing Belle for free functions like an activated ability from your hand and not an alternate cost. So with that in mind, it would seem like you could not activate the ability from outside of your hand, and was later clarified so that you would not be able to banish items while in play. However, the clarification players have been seeking involves stating with certainty whether that ability could be activated from places not in play, since the hand is not considered in play, and underneath the cauldron would also not be considered in play. So again, as of now, it is heavily implied that this cannot work, that she cannot be played because it has to be activated from hand, but we still await confirmation whether that ability is limited to just the hand or just as long as it's not in play. Number 9, our next example created quite a bit of buzz, Rapunzel Ready for Adventure. She is a 2-cost 1/2 with support and the ability Act of Kindness, which reads, whenever one of your characters is chosen for support until the start of your next turn, the next time they would be dealt damage, they take no damage instead. Now, many questions surrounded how or whether this effect stacks multiple times. Or rather, could multiple instances of support grant multiple instances of damage prevention? This was actually addressed specifically in the release notes for Whisper in the Well, citing a question on whether or not multiple instances of Act of Kindness would apply multiple times. To quote their reply, No, if an event would be affected by multiple instances of the same replacement effect, their player chooses which one to apply and the other effects cease to exist. Now, the comprehensive rules were also updated to reflect this, specifically 778 stating that 2 or more instances of the same replacement effect can't apply to the same event. If multiple instances of the same replacement effect would apply to the same event, the player whose card or effects are being affected by those chooses one to apply. The rest cease to exist. The simplified version of this is you can't double up the same replacement effect. As in, if you double support a character, you still get both support gains, since support is a triggered ability and not a replacement effect, but you do not get both damage preventions, as those are duplicate replacement effects. However, in addition to all of that, another question popped up with regards to resist. Specifically, if I have something like a Rhino Power Hamster in play, and I quest with Rapunzel and choose Rhino to give it support 1. Act of Kindness triggers upon supporting Rhino, and on resolution, Rhino gains a static effect, preventing the next instance of being dealt damage. Well, how does that work with resist? Specifically, how does that work if resist reduces damage to 0? To deal with this, we have to first remind ourselves of some of the attributes and applications of resist. Specifically, that resist is a static ability that creates a replacement effect. The effect created is that damage dealt to this is reduced by n, where n is the number after resist. With this in mind, if we look at our Rhino, which has resist 2 and now has next time it would be dealt damage, they take no damage instead, let's imagine playing a Fire the Cannons, choosing Rhino. Now, Rhino shouldn't take any damage from this 2 damage action, but the question is how and why. Is the no damage a result of the Act of Kindness shield, so to speak, or the resist 2, or both? Both Act of Kindness and Resist's effects are replacement effects, and multiple replacement effects are covered in Section 777. And basically, if multiple effects would apply, you choose which applies first and then apply the others until there are no more replacement effects left to apply. So let's say that I choose to apply Resist first, which would reduce the damage dealt by 2. Would Act of Kindness still trigger and be used up, or would that remain since Rhino was not actually dealt damage? Well, sections 921 and other rules which reference resist have clues as to how that may be interpreted, since they are referencing an adjustment or modification of damage dealt. It could be interpreted that a character is still dealt damage, it just happens to be that the amount is 0. Like in the case of Fire the Cannons on a Resist 2 character. It feels super weird and kind of counterintuitive, but I could understand that being a valid interpretation. However, in the description of resist itself, the last line in 10.8.3 states specifically, if damage dealt to this character or location is reduced to 0, no damage is considered to have been dealt. So, like the Belle and Cauldron dilemma, we are still awaiting official confirmation. So far, based on Kyle's comments, it would appear that a damage instance of 0 when reduced by resist would still count as removing the proverbial shield placed by Rapunzel, but we still lack any official statement on that. So if any official announcements, corrections, or updates are made, I will make sure to put that in the pinned comment below. Number 10. All right, a card is straight up broken based on the way that it's worded and the way cards are resolved. The situation involves 2 cards that appear that they should work together, but technically do not given the current iteration of rules text. These cards are the action, Get to Safety, and the accompanying location, Sleepy Hollow the Bridge. The text on Sleepy Hollow isn't all that relevant here, other than it's a 3-cost location that's able to put itself into your discard. What we care about is how Get to Safety interacts with it once it's there. Get to Safety is a 1-cost action that reads, play a location with cost 3 or less from your discard for free. Then, if you have a location named Sleepy Hollow in play, draw a card. So it would make sense then that if you had previously banished, discarded, or otherwise gotten a Sleepy Hollow into the discard, you go to play Get to Safety, and that would allow you to put Sleepy Hollow into play and then draw a card. right? Right? Well, unfortunately, not according to section 716, specifically the part that says, if an ability or effect instructs you to play a card as part of resolving that ability, you must resolve the ability before playing the card. If the instruction is followed by an additional step for resolving the ability, the card doesn't resolve or come into play until the ability is fully resolved, even if it's moved to a different zone. Okay, so why does that matter? Well, let's play it out. I have a Sleepy Hollow in my discard, and I go to play Get to Safety. I am in the process of resolving Get to Safety's effects, and there are two things that need to happen. First, I'm deciding to play a location from my discard, but per 716, it has to sit and wait for the rest of Get to Safety to resolve. All right, cool. Next, I check to see if Sleepy Hollow is in play in order to draw a card. Currently, Sleepy Hollow is not yet in play, so I don't draw a card. Now, we've finished fully resolving the action, it's completely done resolving, and Sleepy Hollow can now enter play. Effectively, due to 716 requiring that a card fully resolve before playing another card, the check for Sleepy Hollow happens before there is an opportunity for Sleepy Hollow to enter. Now, while I'm sure this was an unintended consequence, much like the set 1 Moana not working with multiple copies that was later fixed with errata text, as of writing this, there is no definitive answer, but I assume it will need to be played as the rules currently state until an errata or rules update changes that in the future. Well, that's all I've got for you today. If you've got your own cool rules interactions, a question, or maybe I got something wrong, share it in the comments below. Thanks for sticking around, and as always, stay questing, stay winning. If you enjoyed that, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and if you want more gameplay or breakdown videos, check out the playlist and recommendations here.